I often think when I'm talking to clients and even friends and family, actually, the best way of ensuring that we lose today is to spend the day worrying, perhaps stressful, anxious, having anxiety. And very often, if we do this day after day after day, we can end up in a state of depression, which is quite challenging. And again, clinical depression is not the same as us just having some depression. So I'm not discussing clinical depression in this instance, but nonetheless, it's something that you can end up with if we don't deal with some of the day-to-day challenges. So I just wanted to say that in my experience, I've had many situations myself and even clients over the years that have had something that's very challenging, only to find out that something is even more challenging in a week's time. And if we're not careful, we can base our feelings at the moment on this idea that I just want to get back to normal. That's one of the things that COVID-19 is creating. But it's quite funny because for many people, they weren't happy with the normal. They weren't happy with how life was. But with the restrictions we've now got, they think, well, actually, life was really good. And so we go back to thinking, well, actually, if only I could just do what I used to do, wouldn't that be wonderful? And in many cases, it would be. But just a bit of conjecture, really, from my part. What about if next week we weren't in the situation we were today, but things were more restricted? Perhaps we had other health challenges or different challenges that we might have in our life that we hadn't even anticipated now. And yet we're losing today just waiting to get back to normal. So I think it's really important to remember that we should be looking at life a day at a time. People say they want certainty, but that is insanity. Things are never certain, never certain. Uncertainty is challenging, but it's far more realistic. And for me, it's sanity as opposed to certainty being madness. Nothing is certain. That's the challenge of life, isn't it? And it's also the joy of life. Things don't stay the same for very long, one way or the other. So what do we do to try and make more of the day on a day-to-day basis? Well, first of all, one of the basic cognitive behavioural therapy ideas is that you get a little book or a piece of paper, if you haven't got a piece of book, and you write down 2, 3, 4 things about the day that you really enjoy. And they can be really simple things. It might be just sitting down to have a meal together. If you do that, it may be sitting out in the sun. It may be watching nature. It may be reading a book or even watching a program or a fitness regime, a little bit of exercise. But actually start to get your brain focusing on what you enjoy from the day, not all the things that you can't do at the moment and what you're finding particularly difficult, because what we feed the brain, what we feed the hippocampus, is what actually generates in the end our moods. So if you imagine the hippocampus as a big hippo with a wide open mouth, think about what you put into it, think what you feed it. If you feed it good thoughts, kind thoughts, optimistic thoughts, realistically, but optimistic thoughts, and also being grateful for where you are today and what you can get out of it. If you start to do that, then you'll reduce your anxiety level and your stress and your worry. And just a little bit on that, and I'll perhaps do a graphic to show it in another video. But when we are full of stress and worry and anxiety, we start to release part of the fight or flight process. And one of the things that happens is we release something called cortisol into the body. So it's a hormone that we release into the body. And it's very, very damaging if we release it when it's not required. And that's what can happen with ongoing stress and anxiety. If you think about good things, even if you just visualize them, and you think about being somewhere nice with somebody nice, maybe somebody you're with now, hope for many of you it is that person, but doing something that you particularly like and dream a little, you will release oxytocin. And oxytocin is the feel-good hormone, and you can't have the two in the body at the same time at the same level. So as you as you bring more oxytocin in, the cortisol drops down. So you're reducing this fight or flight, this impact that can happen in the body, which only really was ever in humans for an emergency situation. It wasn't for, receiving a letter you're not expecting, or, perhaps getting a text or a WhatsApp or something that's upset you. But our body tends to now respond in that way to these things. So we have to bring it down. So great way to bring it down is visualize something that will give you joy. Try and smile as much. I struggle with that, but because my smile has always struggled. I think that's from being a little boy, but I try. And inside I'm smiling, so that's why hope is okay. And you will reduce the cortisol and increase oxytocin. Kindness, gratitude, look after people, be patient, be understanding, understand that everybody's got a level of stress at the moment that we're really not used to. Once again, it's uncertainty. But if you can get your thinking right and then finally breathing, and I've said about it before, but simple way, try and do 6 breaths in a minute, just gently in and out, ideally just through the nose, and slightly longer out than in, which is all to do with increasing something called vagal tone. So get the breathing going, and again, things that you enjoy will release oxytocin. So just to go through some of those, so listening to music, reading a book for many as well, dancing, nothing to stop you dancing, doesn't matter whether you think you can dance or not. There's a lovely card that has a woman dancing on it and said there's a certain amount of wine that just makes me feel like I'm the greatest dancer ever. And I think we should all do that. We should all dance and sing and find ways to get enjoyment, and this oxytocin will be firing up and the cortisol will be kept down and you will feel better. We don't achieve anything through continually trying to crystal ball gaze and imagine what might happen tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. What we do know is what we can do with where we are at the moment and making the most out of it. And we should do that as a starting point rather than actually, well, what am I going to do when? And then imagining all of the challenges with that, sometimes catastrophizing them. So that's my short video, and I hope you find it helpful, and I intend to keep trying to put some more together. Thank you.